For our final zone, we have one more original area, Titanic Monarch Zone. It's worth mentioning that the number of zones actually corresponds to the entry number of each game. So for example, we have just Green Hill Zone for Sonic 1, we have 2 zones from Sonic 2 and CD if I'm not mistaken, Oil Ocean and Chemical Plant for Sonic 2, and Stardust Speedway and Metallic Madness for Sonic CD, and we have 3 zones for Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Hydra City, Flying Battery, and Lava Reef. So again, that's very cool. Also, we have 4 zones, 4 original zones, because, in a way, this is Sonic 4. We have Studiopolis, Mirage Saloon, Press Garden, and of course, Titanic Monarch. So again, it's very cool actually having that little Easter egg hidden there. We have these little like weighted platforms like in Death Egg from Sonic 3, not my favorite thing. I tend to get messed up by those quite a bit in that game. We also have these little roller coasters piloted by egg robos, which is very charming. Sonic's like, you know, hands-up animation there. We also have these little robots that'll try to launch an attack after a set amount of time. Again, I do like how there's a mix of like polygonal elements along with 2D elements. It's worth mentioning that the giant mech that we're now invading was actually seen in the background, if I'm not mistaken, of Stardust Speedway, and some other scenes as well, like on monitors that Eggman has. And in that case, it actually was 3D and was actually rotating during the boss fight, the second phase of the boss fight with Metal Sonic, if I'm not mistaken. We also have a really weird callback. We have these little spheres that we have to rotate around. Basically, we have to jump off of those, and these are actually drawn from the item mini-games from Sonic 3, actually. So again, a very specific callback, but a very interesting one to draw in, to pull in for an actual, like, full level. So again, a lot of elements of Sonic Mania just feel so clever to me, and again, it's why this game stands out so much. Like, they have some very deep cuts throughout all of the level design, and that just really helps it to excel. That was a really bad launch, obviously, and another very bad launch there. We have no rings, so I definitely should be a little bit more careful here as we try and make our way through. Titanic Monarch being the final zone, it makes sense that this is actually one of the longer sets of levels. On a first-time playthrough, there is a very high likelihood that you might end up getting a timeout, because the second act in particular can easily take like 10 minutes or so if you're not careful, and ends up getting stuck in a loop. So be careful about that. By the way, in addition to actually dying from taking damage, the spikes can also crush you here. I didn't mean to give an actual demonstration, but there you go. Good example of why this area is very dangerous. So let's try to take our time a little bit more here as we try to squeeze through this gap there. I'm worried about a ring count, to be honest. This next boss can be a little tricky without Supersonic, so we'll have to see how this goes. In general, I do like the atmosphere of this zone. The music is very foreboding and definitely fitting of a final zone. But it also feels like it has, other than reusing certain set pieces, it feels like it has a very distinct identity from any other Robotnik creation. But even like you have various like Robotnik faces built into the actual like stage design, which I think is really cool, or like the background design. So again, it definitely feels very fitting of Robotnik. While again, having a very distinct identity from something like, you know, Death Egg for the 50th time, which is definitely not a problem definitely a problem we'll be having with an upcoming Sonic game as well. But for the meantime, let's keep moving here. We have to carefully weigh down these platforms to get through here. We'll barely have enough rings for the boss at this rate, which is nice. We have 29 lives, which really goes to show how much more forgiving and easygoing Sonic Mania is compared to, like, a lot of the actual classic Sonic games. Like, I can't even remember ever having this many lives in a classic Sonic game before this point. Maybe Sonic 4 because of how easy it is to get lives in Episode 1 specifically. But yeah, in general, I will say Mania is actually an interesting game to recommend, partly just because it is one of the more, you know, user-friendly 2D Sonic games. But it is actually one of the situations where it has so many quality of life improvements, I almost feel like it'd be difficult going back to it if you haven't already played the classic game. So yeah, I would recommend Mania, definitely, and again, I'll probably talk a little bit more about it towards the end of the playthrough. But again, it almost kind of spoils you for the other Sonic games, especially when you actually realize how many mechanics are actually lifted from the other games. It definitely stands out a lot more if you kind of treat everything as original, if that makes sense. But we should be getting pretty close to the boss. We'll transform into Supersonic just to make this a little bit faster. We have this little like machine here, we have to attack I, while in theory dodging all the little orbs, but obviously we do not have to worry about that as Supersonic. That being said, there is Phase 2. We actually have a gravity mechanic here, where our jumps are actually affected by whether the elevator is going up or down, which can definitely be very tricky without Supersonic's higher jump. Titanic Monarch Act 2 is really fascinating. It has some very unique gimmicks to it, and I still to this day am not entirely sure how I feel about this, if I'm being completely honest. Again, this is like a very time-consuming act, so again, don't feel bad if you get a time over your first time through. This does take a while if you don't know exactly where you're trying to go. We have these little warp points, but we basically end up in this big hub area with 4 more warps. Basically, we have to go through each of these and reach the end to basically clear this section. It can definitely be very difficult to figure out where you have to go at first, and again, in that case, I don't even actually know where I'm trying to go. I guess down here works. But yeah, you can lose a lot of time by just essentially getting stuck in a loop here. So yeah, there is, again, the option in Mania Plus to disable the time limit, so I would potentially recommend that if you're struggling on this stage in particular. We actually got to see what that attack does, finally. Very unfortunate timing on that as we fell into the abyss there. But luckily we don't start at the beginning of the sequence, we actually start at the, like, midpoint that we already reached, so it's luckily a little bit forgiving at least. You also have a lot of appearing springs. This isn't one of my favorite mechanics in the classic games, partly just because sometimes it can be difficult to see where you're going, because you literally can't see where you're supposed to go. I guess Tails is going to get attacked by that now. Tails can make this section a little bit tougher, obviously, because he is weighing down the platform too. So that is one downside of having Player 2 for this. And now I'm trying to figure out, once again, where I'm trying to go. Again, even having played this game a bunch of times, I still feel like I occasionally struggle with figuring out where I'm supposed to go. Again, some stages like this definitely feel a lot more Sonic CD in terms of being a lot more windy and confusing compared to like the more linear designs of like Sonic 2 and 3, for example. I feel like Sonic 2 is a fairly linear game as an example. Obviously you have some exceptions, like Metropolis kind of sucks in terms of like figuring out where to go. But again, this part is blocked off now, so that's 1 section down and 3 more to go, and we are 2.5 minutes through the stage. So again, this is a pretty time-consuming level. Sometimes I definitely feel like, again, this game does borrow a lot from Sonic CD, which again kind of makes sense why that's the first game that this team ended up remastering back in the day. I actually wonder what the process behind that was, like what the decision process to remaster CD was, and not like Sonic 1 2 first. I almost fell straight into the spikes because I let go of the controller for a moment. That obviously would have been really bad with our 101 rings. I would really like to have Supersonic for the final bosses. Well, final boss that we don't have a choice with, I should specify, because you might have guessed that there might be a secret thing if you have all the Chaos Emeralds. Yeah, for the final boss where we have an option, I would like to have Supersonic to make things a little bit safer, because it is actually a very annoying boss fight in actuality. So, we'll see how that goes, I guess. We have 124 right now, so we'll do our best to hold on to as many as possible. These little, like, bomb robots are very stressful to try to get through. Sometimes, like, my timing is just really bad, and I end up hitting the robot just as it's tossing the bomb, and end up getting clipped anyway, so again, sometimes it can be a little bit unfortunate like that. Yeah, overall this is going pretty smoothly. We're essentially halfway done with the main level, and we still have plenty of time left. This part obviously is very scary, as we're trying to carefully hop through with all of our rings intact. Again, that's another example of the, like, hidden springs being a little annoying here. I was trying to actually defeat the robot, but luckily it missed somehow, so that works out, actually. So yeah, that was very lucky there. I'm not entirely sure how I made it through that unscathed, but I'll take it. I was about to jump straight into the spike, so I ended up using the super form anyway. So yeah, unfortunately we are supersonic now. Again, there's a possibility that I might want to jump into a checkpoint mini-game just to reset the super form, depending on how long we can actually carry this form throughout the rest of the level. We might be fine though, we have plenty of rings at the moment, but again, it just kind of depends on how long the final sequence is. The main problem with running out of rings is not that you're no longer supersonic. The problem is you don't have rings, period, so that can definitely make certain sequences a lot tougher. So yeah, I might take this. So yeah, now we're not losing rings every second, which will definitely be nice for peace of mind, as we want as many rings as possible going into the final set of challenges in Titanic Monarch Zone. We have a very interesting set piece here. We're kind of trying to aim for this, like, middle section, which is easier said than done. Second try is actually really good, in my opinion, for that. We also have these little wind robots again, which are a little bit annoying. I'm more worried about the electricity though. Again, I'm kind of like hovering over the supersonic button just to be ready in case I have to activate the transformation as quickly as possible. Because again, I really don't want to fight the boss without rings. And again, the worst case scenario is actually having no rings for this. Truth be told, I'm not entirely sure what the game is wanting me to do here. That works, but again, I'm not entirely sure if that's where I'm supposed to be going. Again, sometimes these levels can be a little bit confusing in terms of actually, like, trying to figure out where you're supposed to go based on, like, the overall readability of everything. Like, right now it feels like I'm going in a loop, to be honest. I have no clue if this is the right way or not. Just kind of hoping for the best. I think we actually have to slingshot here to get to the lower path, like so. And that spring will do that for us, so we should be in the clear as we enter the final stretch of Titanic Monarch. All 4 sections are done, meaning we have one final wormhole to the boss. So we'll transform into Supersonic, head over here, and obviously our final boss is Dr. Robotnik, using a robot powered by the Phantom Ruby. This fight sucks, partly just because of hitboxes in my opinion. It's shielded right now. Basically when it uses like an electricity attack, it will lower the shield temporarily, and that's your opportunity to strike. But obviously trying to actually reach it in time can be very stressful. Once one arm is down, the entire fight gets way easier, because then you actually have like an opening to actually reach it. But yeah, actually reaching it with the electricity can be very annoying. Another thing you can actually do is generate Phantom Ruby hands like this, that'll basically take you elsewhere to a sort of like phantom refight of sorts against some of the hard-boiled heavies. So we have the heavy gunner again, except this time we basically have to deflect its missiles like that. But you can also run into like the shinobi and rider as well. We probably won't see those given how fast this fight goes with the super form. But again, you can't really dodge the hands very easily. I usually just jump into the hands myself just to speed up the fight, to be honest. I'm actually not sure if you can avoid those, and if that'll just skip a phase by doing so. So we'll see which hard-boiled heavy we get this time. We have the Shinobi, which is actually one of the most annoying ones to deal with, because of like the saw blade attack is honestly kind of annoying to deal with. So again, this is why I like having the super form for this. I'm not sure if dealing damage also speeds up the illusion phases or not. I've actually never been able to deal enough damage, I feel. I felt like it did with the gunner phase, but I don't know about that one. And to tell the truth, I don't know if I've ever seen the other hard-boiled heavy in this. I don't think I've ever had the fight go on long enough for that, but this should be it. Truth be told, this final boss is one that I have slightly mixed feelings on. In concept, I think it's really cool. Basically, the Heavy King is transformed into the Phantom King by the Phantom Ruby, and now Eggman and the Phantom King are fighting over the Phantom Ruby. So conceptually, I think it's fantastic. In actuality, I think it's kind of clunky. Like, trying to actually find an opening is surprisingly difficult, and sometimes the hitboxes can be a little finicky. You can fly in this fight. In general, I kind of like staying towards the ground and jumping. I find it a little bit more consistent. But again, in theory, this is a cool fight. In practice, it's a little unwieldy, especially the Heavy King, because I feel like the energy blasts are really annoying to dodge, and also cause you to drop rings too, which can definitely be annoying. The song is also great. Interestingly, it actually incorporates a riff from the chorus of the song Fist Bump from Sonic Forces. Gee, I wonder why that is. Either way, again, this fight's fun. There's also like a charge attack you can do with Supersonic, but it costs rings, so I do not recommend using it, just because you should save your rings for other things in this fight. But again, just the hitboxes, because of like Eggman's robot and also the Phantom King's attacks, just ends up being a little bit unwieldy, and it just makes the fight end up feeling a little bit more frustrating than anything, in my opinion. I was kind of expecting to actually die on this fight, to be honest. Like, that's how much I struggle with this usually, and that's usually just because I end up wasting too much time because of everything else happening. Luckily, there are some rings floating around. I accidentally used the charge attack. That's what it looks like, if you were wondering. Either way, we should be getting pretty close to the end of the fight here. Those also respawn very quickly, so that's another issue with this fight they have, is it's very hard to find an opening specifically against the Phantom King. Eggman, or Robotnik more specifically, is not as bad. I usually just kind of damage boost and hope for the best. There goes the Phantom King, so one more hit should finish the fight. And with that, Dr. Robotnik and the Phantom King have been stopped. However, both Sonic and the Phantom Ruby have been sent to somewhere else. I feel a little bit torn about the ending, mostly just because of what it ties into. Again, I'd like to go through Forces at some point to more further elaborate on my grievances with tying these two games together, and my grievances with Forces as a whole, but for now, outside of the cliffhanger that's just designed to set up the other part of the anniversary celebration, again, both games actually came out a year late. I think this was planned for 2016 but got delayed. Forces, I think, was planned for 2017 from the beginning, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, Sonic Mania is a fantastic game in my opinion. It takes a lot of the best parts of all of the series, or all of the classic games up to this point, and just makes a really nice adventure out of them. That being said, I do think it does lose a few points for me just because of originality, basically because so much is taken from Sonic 1 CD, 2 and Knuckles, or 3 and Knuckles, it ends up feeling less fresh as a result. So because of that, I think this is still a great game. It is still easily a top 3 after probably Sonic 2 and maybe Sonic 3 and Knuckles. I kind of go back and forth. Again, part of it's nostalgia versus quality in cases like Sonic 2. Obviously, I fully admit Sonic 3 is the better game of the two, but when you throw Mania into the mix, I'm not sure whether I like Mania or 3 and Knuckles more. In some ways, I think I actually like Mania better, though part of it's burnout with Sonic 3 and Knuckles because I've played that game so many times, and to be fair, I played this game a ton when it came out. You might have noticed all the save files when we loaded up the game. However, it's also been a while since I've actually done a full playthrough, which again is why I struggled a lot with the early giant rings, because I didn't remember where a lot of them were, and it would have helped if I actually had studied the game, but also again, there's the risk of burnout if I over-practiced it, having already done like 10 playthroughs of this game in the last like 6 years or so. Either way, I really enjoyed this game. I can definitely still recommend this game. I think it's still fantastic. If you're a fan of 2D Sonic game, it's definitely a love letter to those games, but I almost feel like even people who aren't really familiar with the games might still get something out of it just because it's just a pretty solidly made platformer with a lot of nostalgia, which is also very nice. But again, in general, I think this is definitely still a favorite of mine from the 2D side of the Sonic series. In general, I find it a little bit difficult to lump the 2D and 3D Sonic games together because of both time of release and also just what they're striving to do, basically. So I don't really like comparing something like Generations to Mania because they're kind of going for different like styles entirely, to the point where their attempts at creating an anniversary celebration feel like different, if that makes sense. Still, I enjoyed going through the game again. We're not quite done yet because I would like to show off some of the Knuckles exclusive content and also the Mania Plus content, because quite a bit was actually added in this mode. In the base game, there's also plenty of extras tied to the Blue Sphere mode, which we haven't even seen yet, to be honest. So at some point, so after this, I would like to go over everything. Hopefully, it'll take one video, I think it will, to close out the playthrough, and highlight some of the other cool features in Sonic Mania and Sonic Mania Plus. As an overall, like, game, I definitely feel like I wish more had been done in terms of making original stage designs, because again, the original stages are some of the best in this game, and it's a shame we only got 4, not counting like, you know, new level designs that were based on existing level designs. Like, obviously, a lot of the Act 2s early on were very different from the originals, but again, the Act 1s were largely intact. So in general, I kind of wish we had gotten more original stages. That was obviously a big hope for a long time, that this team would end up working on a follow-up game that was entirely original. And again, there were apparently talks of having Christian Whitehead working on what would become Superstars, but again, from what I understand, he was just too busy because he's working on his own projects with his team. And again, Simon Tomley worked on several independent projects of his own, but also came back to work on the 3 and Knuckles port in Sonic Origins, which again, not the best launch, but it's in an okay state at the moment. Yeah, it's very interesting seeing, you know, 6 years later, how much the state of the Sonic franchise has changed. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, to be honest. This game was kind of a relief after how iffy Sonic 4 was as a celebration of the franchise. So yeah, this was definitely a much better attempt at a love letter to the franchise. But yeah, now that we have Frontiers and hopefully Superstars again is good, again, we'll know by the time this video comes out. I'm really hoping the Sonic franchise will end up finding its footing again, because things were definitely a little bit rough for a while. But yeah, here's hoping things are looking up for the series. I'm pretty sure the credits are winding down before too long. In general, again, this was a lot of fun going through the game again. But yeah, we're still not quite done, and that is going to be interesting seeing some of the other content as well in the next video. Also, yeah, the music is great. Again, I've said that so many times, and again, the art style is great. This game is just really fun in a lot of ways. Probably the most fun Sonic game, but again, my biggest gripe is just I've kind of played it too much, which is on me, but when you add in a ton of characters later on, it incentivizes playing it again, so I just have done a ton of playthroughs of this game. And again, I still love this game a lot, but again, it definitely doesn't hit as hard as like the first time you see, like, wow, they actually did a callback to like Sky Chase, or like Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. So yeah, things don't hit as hard the second time around, but that doesn't mean that this still isn't a very well-made anniversary game. So yeah, in general, again, I'm very curious to see what happens with the Sonic franchise going forward. Yeah, here's hoping that things are looking up for the series, because yeah, after this game, things definitely took an immediate downturn with Sonic Forces. But again, I'll save my thoughts on that for when we eventually get the Forces, because I would like to at some point, because again, I'm not sure if it's a great game by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a game I find very fascinating for a multitude of reasons. Again, a lot of times I find even the bad Sonic games are at least interesting and fun because they're so unique in how they've come together and ended up this way. But with that being said, thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time for more Sonic Mania Plus.